Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to share with you 5 major problems with the Logitech G29 sim racing wheel. Now a disclaimer real quick, the wheel is great, it's great value for your money, it really changes your game up and really helps you enjoy your racing game more than a regular controller would ever or could ever do. So having said that, nothing is perfect and the Logitech G29 is no exception, and it does have some problems. Problem number 1 is the loudness of the shaking and the rumbling in this wheel. So to give you an example of that, let's go off-roading a little bit. Let's jump off this cliff and see if we get a chance to drive around in the grass a little bit so that you can see how loud it is. So this is a good spot right here where you could hear some of the shaking. I'm not really doing much, we're just driving through water, some off-roading experience here. So if you were to have some fun and just play around like this, let's go get this XP also. But you'll notice the banging sound in the wheel. You could hear a lot of shaking, and when you're playing it for the first time, you think something's breaking in the wheel. You think something is wrong, but really there's nothing wrong. The car drives perfectly. There is a bit of shaking and the rumbling, but the loudness of it is always very, very surprising, and it happens mostly when you hit bumps and you go off-road. When you're not off-road, it's quiet and it works beautifully, but when you're off-road, as you can hear it probably in the mic, it is crazy. And sometimes it is so crazy that while you're driving, makes the whole wheel come off the desk. Which leads me to problem number 2. The reason why the wheel sometimes comes off when you're like off-roading and it's shaking too much is that the clamp system in the G29 is not that great. So the way it's clamped onto the desk, it's got these 2 hooks at the bottom that get screwed tight, and it's like a little arm clamp. There's 2 arm clamps that really tighten around your desk surface, and when that happens, when you tighten it up and the shaking starts to happen when you're off-roading, it slowly starts to unscrew and loosen the clamps up, which makes the G29 wheel slowly slide off and sometimes abruptly slide off while you're in the middle of a game, and then you're trying to drive and also keep the wheel on the desk, which is very annoying. Now this doesn't happen very often, it's a rare thing, but when it does, it's very annoying. Problem number 3 is related to the quality of the force feedback that we get in this wheel. Now there are lots of settings you can change, there's lots of different things you can do, and I'm going the same way, so I'm going to turn back around. There's lots of settings you can change and things you can do, both in-game and also in the G-Hub G29 app. It's not a G29 app, but the G-Hub app that's for your Logitech devices. You can change some settings, not a whole lot, but that can affect the force feedback amount. And also there's some in-game settings, like for example in Forza 5, you can play around with the force feedback and you can change the intensity of it and make it more or less. But the problem is not the amount of force feedback. The problem I'm referring to relates to the quality of the feedback. Now a lot of the force feedback seems like it's almost very hiccupy, or it's a little bit glitchy. You could feel like there's some hard locks if you've driven a real car with the steering wheel locking up on you. Well, that kind of happens during the force feedback. It's very hard to explain, but sometimes force feedback, the way you would expect it, is kind of like a smooth tightening of the wheel, which I just experienced right now, which happens most of the time. Like it tightens up a little bit and it feels like, oh wow, you're really feeling the car moving in one direction, and you really got to use your physical strength to move the car in another direction. That's fine. Most of the time it works that way and it's great. But when the bumps happen, the feedback is kind of disruptive. It's not smooth. It doesn't work very well. Combined with the shaking and the rumble of the wheel, it really throws you off, and it actually negatively affects, I think, your driving performance in the game. Especially becomes really hard when you're trying to drift and stuff, because There's no smooth turning of the wheel. It's very rare that you get a smooth turning of the wheel. The quality of the force feedback is kind of a hit or miss. On a straight road with not a lot of obstacles and stuff, things go fine. But if you start moving around a little bit, you get a bump or two, the force feedback can be a little bit too extreme out of nowhere. Like, there's no gradual increase in the force feedback. It feels too abrupt sometimes, and it also feels too abruptly gone sometimes. So that is problem number 4 that I experience with G29. Sometimes the force feedback just completely disappears, and it's not an issue with the game, it's not an issue with the hardware. It's just there's a couple of instances where that happens. So if I am flooring the throttle, flooring the acceleration all the way, and I'm driving like that for a long time, the wheel becomes jelly basically. There's like all force feedback is completely gone, and it happens for a few moments, and if I let my foot off the gas pedal or the accelerator, then the force feedback comes back. Now part of it is kind of trying to mimic real life kind of racing simulation. When you lose traction, your wheel kind of goes in a free fall kind of a mode, but I'm talking about things happening when you do have traction, when you clearly are on the surface and the car is driving and picking up speed, but immediately sometimes like the wheel just completely goes numb, and it's like really loose. You can't even tell the wheel is plugged in. It feels sometimes like the wheel is just completely disconnected, but it is working. Like it turns the car and everything. For a few moments, the wheel just completely goes powerless. It becomes a complete like easy to turn kind of a situation, and there is no hint of any force feedback left. I've only experienced this in Forza Horizon 5. I haven't experienced this in Need for Speed Heat, which I've also played with the wheel. Final major problem with the Logitech G29 wheel, in my opinion, is the bare bones software experience. I wish there was more in the G-Hub app that I could do to kind of tweak the feeling of the wheel. In-game settings for example, for Forza Horizon 5 are great. They really help out. I think a lot of games have really in-depth settings for the wheel and how you want it to feel, but it would be nice to tweak around the quality, the strength of the force feedback in the G-Hub app a little bit more. When you open up the G-Hub app, you'll notice that there's only 3 things you can do with the wheel. You could obviously do some button mapping, but that's not really a feature. I would say like you could do that with any controller even, so the wheel doesn't really add anything more to it, but it does give you the option to change the sensitivity of the turn, the amount of the rotation of the wheel. That's nice. And lastly, it allows you to change the force, the strength with which the wheel centers itself, the centering strength or the centering force, whatever it calls it. And besides those few things, there's really not much that it allows you to do, which I'm very surprised by, because you would think with a sophisticated and advanced device like this, you would have lots of things that you can tweak around to get the optimal experience. And I could see why it's like that, because like I said before, the games themselves have settings that you can tweak around, especially for example Forza Horizon 5 has so many things you can tweak around to create a different kind of a feeling in the wheel. But it would be nice to, for example, just make the steering wheel, instead of a racing feeling wheel, to turn its setting to like a luxury wheel. Smooth, very soft power steering wheel. Right now, there isn't a whole lot you can do with that. Like if you reduce the centering force, for example, on the app, on the G-Hub app, then the wheel doesn't center itself, but it becomes really soft. So, if you like a really soft feeling of a wheel, especially when you want to drift and stuff, it feels nice to have like a softer wheel, especially in a game, because you want the wheel to spin quickly and smoothly in your hands. Then you could do that. You could create a softer feeling. You can make the wheel feel really light and not very tight, but then you lose the centering power of it. And that's not what you want. You want to be able to have a wheel that centers itself very quickly, but at the same time is very soft to turn and doesn't require a whole lot of force. So I'm just saying that if that's one of the things you want to experience while you're driving, you don't want to experience a very tight wheel. You can't create like a profile for your wheel's tightness and stuff like that in the G-Hub app. Now you can achieve that feeling by completely dampening out the force feedback in, for example, the game settings. So for Forza Horizon, there's a setting in the advanced controls that's specifically for the force feedback strength. You could turn that down all the way to 0 and you will have 0 force feedback. And now you'll just have a completely non-responsive steering wheel. But that's not what you would want. I think some people would want kind of happy medium. It's a soft feeling steering wheel that doesn't require a lot of strength. It's not very sporty. It's not very tight to turn and stuff. But it's the opposite. It's very smooth and soft. But at the same time, you want the steering wheel to give you some force feedback. But you can have, it appears, both of those things. The G-Hub app, or the app that should be designed specifically for the wheel, would address this kind of a thing. So those are my 5 big gripes, 5 big problems that I've experienced so far with the G29 wheel. Let me know if there's a problem that you've experienced that I didn't mention, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Woo! Peace.